I'm sorry, but I started my timing right then, so I was on time.
You're on time, okay. But we are late. No problem.
So where's David?
David's coming. David,
Ah,
it's your time.
this goes forward, this goes backwards, and that's the
Where's the play? Luca, where's the play?
He's playing. Over there.
Oh,
That's a Macintosh, isn't it?
is it the cable?
No. Moment.
It did that before. It seems to just take its time.
It's a Macintosh. Okay? No.
No, that's fine. So where the problem is, I don't know.
Okay, stop. Don't breath.
I'll try not to step on all these cords back here.
No, you can do it.
Really?
Don't step on mine.
Well, the last speaker and I have a slightly different perspective than some of the others, but it fits together with the general discussion of language origins and what kind of evidence can we use to estimate or predict when language began. And I just want to begin with the acknowledgments before I talk about the data. But I couldn't do this work without Luca Bondioli sitting over here and Ivana Fiore. I'm not sure where she is, but Luca and Ivana and I've worked at the Pigorini, and we've worked together for 15 years now or so on these problems. I'll take the blame for anything that's said that's incorrect, but I want to acknowledge their really important contribution to everything that I say. Oh, there they are. Sorry. This is my only Darwin slide, but Darwin was left-handed. And like many other things about Darwin, this was not normal. Not the typical pattern that we see in modern humans. So, in here, how many people are left-handed? Okay, look around. Do it again so everybody can see. Not very many. Okay? Now, if we were all chimpanzees sitting around here, about 50% would say I'm left-handed if you can get their attention, and the other 50% would say I'm right-handed. But this is a unique feature that we see in modern humans and separates us from all of the fossil apes, our nearest relatives. Whether chimps are raised in captivity, or whether they're tested, or whether they're raised in the wild and tested, or whether they're in the wild and tested, they don't show the kind of handedness that we have. And the evidence that we have that I'll present today is that handedness is something that has been around for a long time. And I can't go over all of the evidence, but I'll talk about a few different pieces of evidence and then some of the research that I've been doing with my Italian colleagues. This is the cave of hands in Argentina. It's thought to be, I think, 8,000 years old. And when you look at it, I think you can see that they're mostly left hands pressed against the wall. But that tells us that these individuals were actually right-handed, and they were making a negative image or a stencil by holding the hand against the wall and then blowing pigment on it and then leaving the stencil behind. And a lot of people have analyzed this and shown that they weren't doing it this way because of the angle of the forearm, etc. But we find these impressions of hands in Australia, and they're mostly right hands. We find them in Europe. This is the famous cave of Peshmerga in France, dated around 20,000 years ago, I think. And you can see that there's one right hand, or made by a left-hander, but there are 4 other left hands made by a right-hander. And these are the oldest handprints from El Castillo in Spain, dated around 37,000 years ago. And you can see they're negative impressions of hands. So there's some evidence on the basis of this that, first of all, it's interesting that most of these hands are made by females. How do you know that? Well, I'll answer that in the questions if you want to know later. But people have looked at cataloged the hands. Just a recent paper. I'm sorry. Just a paper that came out in 2004, so 10 years ago, that cataloged all of the hands and found to see if they were right-handed or left-handed. Back away a little bit? Okay. If they're right-handed or left-handed, and the general ratio of, this is just done with European cave art, based on a sample of around 300. The ratio is 8 were left hands, so they were made with the right hand, and 2 were right hands, so they were made with the left hand. So the ratio in prehistoric Europe for these hand impressions is a ratio of 8 right hand people and 2 left hand people, or an 8-to-2 ratio. Now this is different than the ratio that we see maybe in the room or in modern populations, whether they're from Samoa or the Czech Republic or Kansas, where I'm from. The ratio is 9-to-1. 9 right-handers for every 1 left-handed. And remember that in chimpanzees, it's more or less 5-5, 60-40, sometimes 70-30, 65-35, depending on the study. But species-wide in chimpanzees and in gorillas, it's pretty close to 5-5. And in orangs, interesting, they're left-handed. They're primarily left-handed. But what I'm interested in tracing is when did this ratio of handedness, why is it important, and how old is the appearance of it, and why is it important? First of all, as you all know, the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. And the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. So there is hemispheric specialization in the use of the hands. We also know, and this is where the key part of this and how it relates to the symposium today, we also know that language is primarily, not exclusively, but primarily located in the left side of the brain. And this is why sometimes the brain is called, the left side is called the dominant hemisphere, because of the focus on language. So one of the things that we see in humans is that only humans show this species-wide hand lateralization and of course, and a language. The quote that I want to just focus on is that brain lateralization is central to both language and to handedness in Homo sapiens. And the indices of brain lateralization and handedness is a proxy or is a substitute for estimating when language appeared. Because because since it occurs across living Homo sapiens, since there's this consistent relationship, there seems to be some kind of connection, as the quote illustrates. So how far back can we trace language? Or, I'm sorry, how far back can we trace handedness? Or another way to ask the question is, are human fossils handed like apes, 5 to 5, or are they like modern humans in a 9 to 1 ratio? Now, the handprints that I showed before from El Castillo, there are only like 5 or 6 of them, probably made by modern Homo sapiens, but they only go back 37,000 years, which isn't that far in an evolutionary sense. So is there other evidence that we can look at? Well, people have looked at arm size. Think of tennis players that are habitually using the right hand in a serve compared to the left or the right arm, compared to the left arm, how much bigger the right arm is than the left arm because of the stress put on it. And so people have looked at skeletons of Neanderthals comparing the size of the right versus the left to estimate handedness. Other people have looked at brain endocasts because there's an asymmetry that occurs in brains, human brains, that can tell us something about handedness. But in either case, the samples are very, if you can't see that, it says small. They're not big at all. There are only like about 5 European Neanderthals that have equivalent parts of a right and a left side that are not pathological, one side. And there aren't that many brain endocasts that can be used. So is there another piece of evidence, or is there another way that we can determine handedness? Well, this is a paper that appeared in the Journal of Human Evolution in 1988 by a Spanish team working at Atapuerca, Cima de los Huesos in Atapuerca, and they were looking at scratches that occur on the lip side of anterior teeth. And you can see a scratch there, maybe. And I tried to blow it up so you can't see it very well, but I'll show you better pictures in a second. But you can see these in the actual tooth surface. So one of the sites that I've worked on with my colleagues here is the site in Krapina, in Croatia, called Krapina. And Krapina is here. The hill still exists, but the site was quarried away by a long time ago. It was excavated, or the excavations were controlled by a man named Gorjanovich Kramberger, and the work took place between 1899 and 1905. It's dated recently, in the last 20 years. It's known to be somewhere between 120 and 130,000 years ago, so well before we have any evidence of modern Homo sapiens in Europe, and there are many Neanderthal remains from the site. My friends used this for an exhibit. They have a new Krapina museum exhibit, but they took out all of the bones, or more than 900 bones and isolated teeth, and laid them all out. It looks like some kind of monster from a science fiction movie, but you can see there are crania, teeth, and postcranial skeletons. There are no postcranial skeletons that are associated, so you couldn't look for left-right differences there. But there are teeth and jaws, and then there are these isolated teeth. And we are particularly interested in looking at the anterior teeth, where these scratches occur. So here's a Krapina central incisor, and this is an epoxy cast of one made by Ivana, and you can see the scratches that are here, and then she drew the scratches on, or marked the scratches on where they appeared. So you can see that maybe the first time you look at it, it looks like they're going in all different directions. But if you look at it a little more carefully, you can see that a lot of them are moving in this direction. Sure, there's one this way, but most of them are in that direction. How do they occur? Well, there's experimental evidence that's been done by the Spanish a couple of different times, where you ask, give a person a flake tool, put in a mouth guard like they'd be wearing at a hockey game, and then ask them to cut with right hand, pull with left hand, and cut with the right hand. And when you do that, as shown by this female, that you cut, every now and then you might hit that tooth surface. Not every time, but every now and then. And when you do, it leaves a series of marks that run in that direction. Now, these marks only appear on the canines and incisors, generally more in the upper than in the lower, because the upper incisors are so much bigger. And they only occur on the lip side. So it was a sandy environment where the Crepina bones were found, but it was almost for sure they're not related to some kind of trampling or diagenetic process. Otherwise, you'd expect them to occur on the lingual surfaces and on the molars. Now, if you pull with the right hand and cut with the left hand, you'll see that the scratches move in the opposite direction. So this was the right hand, and the scratches are going this way. Now you're pulling on the right, cutting on the left. The scratches are the opposite oblique direction, as is shown there. So just to get an idea of the comparison, there's the right scratches, and here's the left scratches. So these are primarily going this way. This is a crack, by the way. And these are primarily going this way, a crack. And these are different individuals. They're not the same individual. So it's just to illustrate the difference between right-handed scratches here and left-handed scratches there. So if we catalog these, and these are based on some earlier work that I did, the scratches at Crepina, there are seven individuals at Crepina, and 6 of them are right-handed scratches, and 1 of them is a left-handed scratch. Did I do that right? Destra and Sinistra?
Perfect.
Google Translate. Which gives you a ratio of 86.3%. Sample is small, but it's certainly not 50-50. Then if you add in other European Neanderthals that were done by other workers, not by us, you get the frequencies of 2 left and 11 right, and the ratio there is 84.6%. Okay? So it's not going down, it's going up. Then here's the work that we did with the Pigorini group, and we worked on the site called Vindia, which is a late Neanderthal site in Croatia. This is where the DNA, one of the sites where the DNA has been extracted from. And here are the scratches on this central incisor. Here's another central incisor. And you all know now that these are right-handed scratches because they're oblique in this direction. And they're heavily scratched teeth. Some of them are heavily worn, and some of them are damaged by gripping things in their mouth to process food or hides or who knows what. And if we add the Vindia teeth, there are 4 teeth from Vindia, and they're all right-handed. Now the ratio is 15-2, and we're up to 88%. Okay. All of the teeth that I've discussed up until now, and all of the teeth that have been worked on until a recent paper that I worked on, again, with the Pigorini group, were based on isolated teeth. These are teeth, this is the one example that we have of a Neanderthal that has teeth and also a postcranial skeleton to assess whether it was a right-hander. And this is the specimen from Regardou in France, very close to the Les Aziz cave, where all the cave paintings are. But a Neanderthal associated with Mousterian tools, dated around 70 to 90,000 years ago. So clearly an old Neanderthal. It was first described in 1962, And they looked at cortical bone thickness comparing the right side to the left side and found that it was bigger on the right of the humerus and argued that it was a right-hander. Another colleague, Roberto Macchiarelli, who used to be at Pigorini but is now in Poitiers, at Luca, took the bones to the cyclotron in Geneva, I guess, right? Grenoble. And produced this, can't see it very well here, but they were able to confirm, in this case, using the whole arm chain from the clavicle to the humerus to the radius to the ulna, and it's consistently bigger on the right side than on the left. So they were able to confirm that the specimen was a right-hander. Fortunately, at the site, how much time do I have?
10, less than 10.
Okay. Fortunately, at the site, there's a mandible. The cranium was removed, so there are no maxillary teeth, but there's a mandible, and you can see that it has all 4 incisors. Here's the view from the side, from the front, the side, and from the top. And you can see that the incisors are heavily worn. They show dentin exposure, so that it was definitely gripping things with its front teeth. And the specimen has, we were able to acquire some casts of the specimen. It clearly has right-handed striations, and here's a close-up of it. There are some horizontal ones here, but the majority of the ones, and we test this, I didn't say, but we do some statistical tests of this, that are clearly as a right-hander. So the arm chain of Regordu and the tooth scratches suggest that he was a right-hander. So we can add Regordu to the sample, and now the frequency is up to 88.9%. One of the projects that I'm working on while I'm here this trip in Rome is reanalyzing the Crapina specimens. Ivana went and made copies of them, and we were able to find 3 more individuals that were right-handers compared to the earlier work, and she was also able to find another left-hander. So now the frequency is, it's still not 50-50. As you can see, it's hovering right around that 80 to 90% range, at 9 to 1 range. So it's like, they're like us, not like apes. But the ratio drops a little because there's another left-hander. Now, a colleague of mine from Spain, Almudena Esterich, and Rosa's have a site called El Cedron, which is another site where there's a lot of Neanderthal DNA coming from. And they have 10 individuals from there, and they're all right-handers. So no left-handers. So now we're up to 30 to 3, right at the 9 to 1 ratio, which we're sort of aiming for all along, but not really. I mean, in the sense that we were hoping it's going to be different than what we see in apes. And then finally, one last site to throw in, and that's to go back to the Cima de los Huesos site in Spain, where there are 12 individuals, and they're all right-handers again. So that brings us to, for the fossil Europeans, 42 are right-handers and 3 are left-handers. That gives us a frequency of 93.3. So and I didn't say, but the Cima de los Huesos site is dated around maybe in excess a little bit of 500,000 years. So for 500,000 years in Europe, we have evidence of them being right-handers. So Neanderthals and their ancestors were extremely right-handed. They showed ratios that were not different than we see in worldwide populations today or in Europe. Now, again, go back to this quote by Dean Chance and Tim Crow, arguing that these indices of brain lateralization and handedness are proxies or correlates for the capacity for language. And so to me, based on this evidence, and this evidence alone, there's some evidence, there's I think compelling evidence that Neanderthals were lateralized like we are. Is there any other evidence from the archaeological record? And this is maybe not try to read all these off, but there's a ton of evidence to suggest that Neanderthals, maybe they weren't as sophisticated as Gravettian burials in their burials, but there were some where they were burying infants. There were some where they were burying individuals and separating the head from the body. There are some, I know it's contested, but there are some where they're burying them with flowers in Shanidar, in Iraq. So there are ritual burials, plus there's all this other evidence. There are people in Italy have worked on, like Marco Piercini and the other people in the Pigorini have worked on this site in northern Italy that shows evidence of feather removal. And pigments, we have lots of evidence for pigments now stretching over 80,000 years. So it's not just single pieces of evidence. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that Neanderthals were much more sophisticated than anyone ever thought they were, even 20 years ago. So, language in Neanderthals? Check.
Allora, grazie ai nostri relatori, è estremamente tardi, a meno che non avete delle urgenze proprio di domande fondamentali, io sarei quasi tentato di chiudere qui. Scusatemi, c'è da andare a brindare, visto che bisogna brindare quel pochissimo che c'è per Darwin. Io vorrei darvi appuntamento l'anno prossimo, in quanto ci è piaciuto fare questi Darwin Day, e il secondo, abbiamo già deciso di fare il terzo, che sarà sul cibo e la nutrizione, e poi abbiamo deciso di fare pure il quarto, che sarà nel 2016, che sarà ancora più complicato, sul problema del razzismo, schiavitù e uomo. Cioè una cosa molto complicata e bella. Visto che siete venuti una volta, spero che verrete ancora, non so come ringraziarvi, ringraziamo i nostri relatori che sono stati così eccellenti. Vorrei ringraziare tutti quelli che hanno partecipato qui, vorrei ringraziare Carlo Nobili, che dovrebbe uscire dalla sala regia a farsi vedere, che ci ha fatto tutto questo, vorrei ringraziare Gianfranco Calandra che ha lavorato per noi, abbiamo tante altre persone da ringraziare, vogliamo parlare dei nostri amministrativi, senza i quali non avremmo mai potuto fare niente, Maria Corso, Del Pigorini, Attilio Duppetti, Roma 3, vorrei ringraziare Ornella Ercolani, Antonio Falcone, Walter Colella, Amedeo Abbate, Luca Gabbioli, tanta gente, cioè tutto questo è stato anche grazie a loro. Grazie. Da ultimo dobbiamo ringraziare il personale di vigilanza che con grandissima pazienza sta tenendo aperto il museo molto oltre quello che è normalmente fatto per voi, e ringraziamo chi ci sta, l'associazione Amici del Pigorini, che ci offre, grazie al tegame di rame, qualche cosa da mangiare. Grazie e alla prossima settimana.
Al prossimo anno, scusate.
Non ho ringraziato Erminia per l'interpretariato, scusateci, vergogna su di me.